Hello and welcome. I am the Armchair Audiophile, and today we're going to be taking a deeper dive on the KZ ZSX. To review, this is a 6-driver hybrid earphone, 1 dynamic driver, and 5 balanced armatures. They go for between $50 and $60 on Amazon right now. We covered packaging and accessories in the unboxing, so if you're curious about that, go check it out. One quick correction from that video. I said that the plastic shells felt like they were of a higher quality. That is because they are not injection molded plastic at all. They are a UV cured resin, which is why they feel so much nicer. One quick note before we get to sound, and that is on size and fit. These are one of those IEMs that is supposedly developed based on an average of a bunch of people's custom IEM data, and therefore has this really dramatically contoured shell. If you're on the center of the bell curve for ear size and shape, then these are going to fit great for you. I have pretty average ears, and they fit me almost like a custom. However, if your ears were any smaller than mine, you'd get a lot of pressure points, possibly even seal issues. If they were bigger than mine, you might have this, little area not quite falling where it's supposed to be, also causing fit and seal comfort issues. So just be aware these are large and very contoured shells that are either going to fit great or poorly. So while I'm going to go on to gush about these a little bit, they may or may not fit everybody as well as they fit me, and that's where there is room for other entries like the T2 Pro and the TRN V90 in the mix. But moving on to what we're all here for, the sound. These sound the way I like to listen to music in my car. They sound like a high school dance if I had actually gotten any play in high school. The overall signature is a V, but a shallower V than previous KZ models. Overall, a really fun, casual signature that delivers a lot of detail for $1 while definitely not being an audiophile unit. It's a very colored sound profile. It's ideal for casual use. I think there's enough detail here for the occasional session of more serious listening, but if you're looking for a critical listening set where faith to the recording is going to be the most important, look elsewhere. Soundstage is middle of the road, sort of a space helmet or fishbowl around the head size sound field. There's nothing really to complain about. Also nothing to be exceptionally praised. On the Me pinnacles, sometimes in the treble you can get soundstage artifacts that are just, massive. Massive. I was walking on the 16th Street Mall in Denver, and there are things in Michael Jackson's Thriller that sounded like they were coming from across the street. I actually took the headphones out. That's something to be praised. Last week we talked about the 10 P1s that had really notably congested soundstage. That was something to be criticized. This is pretty much average for an IEM and plenty for pretty much everything I tested on them. But throughout all my testing, I found that they're best suited to pop, hip-hop, and electronic music without being so V-shaped KZ that they weren't useful for other genres. With that said, we're going to talk about where they shine first, and then we're going to talk about where they struggle a little bit. So where they shine, as soon as I finished the P1 review, I started using these as a daily headphone. Actually, most of the time with the Radsound Ear Studio ES100, and that was plenty powerful for these. Sometimes off the KN, very rarely off the XCAN. But my first run with these, I took them to Publix, and put them on the ES100, and I put on Kanye West's Gone, followed by Touch the Sky. And this was an awesome, it was so much fun. Bass is fat, full, elevated. It's not loose or boomy, but it digs deep, reasonably tight for the price point, perfect elevation for sort of hype hip-hop. Vocals, while a little bit recessed, are well separated from the beat and not so recessed that you can't make out, fast bars or, vocal tracks when things start to get complicated. Touch the Sky in particular, the impact of this track starting, it kind of started grooving, acting a little bit of an ass at the Publix. Just a little bit of a dance going on at the Publix, just because of the impact. They're so lively and exciting with the right tracks that you really can get sucked in and find yourself listening louder and longer than you intended to. JPEGMAFIA, Beta Strategies. I was listening to this track on the KN at home. This track has a really layered, subtle beat. It requires pretty fairly solid tuning between treble, mids, and mid bass to sound coherent on this track, and the ZSX handles it really nicely. Vocals still a little recessed versus my typically preferred signature, but that's the V, that's what you're signing up for here. It doesn't lack in clarity at all. It's just set back a little bit in the mix. Bass, plenty tight for the price point. Decay was notably quick and tight on this track. Soundstage, again, middle of the road. Plenty to make the atmospheric, sort of spacey beats on this album sound full and, not like they're being neutered in the way that the Tin P1 kind of gave you that walled-in sensation. Drake, Talk Up, featuring Jay-Z. These are a more casual earphone, so I kind of gave them the fuckboy test a little bit. Played some poppier stuff that isn't in usual rotation for me, but the bass on Talk Up digs really deep and just slaps on the ZSX. One of the reasons I picked this track in particular is there's a vocal sample set with just massive reverb, real quiet in the mix during the pauses in Jay-Z's verse, and how well you can make that out and how well you can place it in space as far as the imaging is concerned is a really good test of a headphone. And I found that it is audible on these. You do get a decent sense of distance, but it's a little bit veiled. It doesn't come through as clearly as something like a DT770 or the Mi Pinnacles particularly. Iversen, Chain Smoking. This is another one of those just Bandcamp tracks that not a lot of you have probably heard, but should definitely check out. I'm an unabashed fan of vaporwave and all of the corny vapor subgenres, and this is one of those like neo 80s vapor pop sort of dancey tracks. And the ZSXs have so much separation and detail for this track that the overall signature combined with that just synergizes really well with the energy of this kind of vapor pop stuff, and it was just kind of delightful. I ended up running through most of that record on these, just kind of doing some chores. Again, I use these casually a lot of the time, just ES100 or straight off the KN, walking around the mall, walking around Publix, doing chores. I definitely sat down and did some critical listening for the review, but I just kind of tried to use them everywhere. Random side note, they do isolate very well. All the vents that I can see are on the inner surface, so they do a good job of blocking out external noise, assuming you get a good seal. And you'll know the sub bass is incredible with a good seal. Without it, you're going to be like, why the hell did I buy these? So you'll know if you're getting a good seal. To this point, we've really only talked about hip-hop and sort of pop tracks, but I had a really good experience listening to some DSDs of Alan Parsons' project on here. Wouldn't Want to Be Like You and Some Other Time off of iRobot. Both played really, really nicely on the ZSX. I couldn't find fault with how they performed on Wouldn't Want to Be Like You at all. The guitar solos at the end of Some Other Time are weighty, dramatic, super exciting. Again, it's nowhere near an audiophile tuning. It's not reference. It's not going to be true to the recording, but there were no glaring flaws on either of those tracks. And there, Alan Parsons' project isn't a modern pop song. It's, 70s prog rock, and it sounded really good. Same can be said for Bloodstone, Who Has the Last Laugh Now. That's what I was listening to as I geared up for the review here. Tons of separation. Soundstage is dead on for this track. The male falsetto vocals are smooth and natural. Percussion attack and decay is excellent. The strings are a little bit thin, but overall, damn, for a $50 to $60 earphone, listening to lossless Bloodstone tracks, I'm impressed. I'm really impressed. Now we're going to talk about some of the small flaws I encountered on this headphone. I was listening to Riot Jazz Brass Band, the track Suspicious Bulge on the ES100. Percussion, still fast, really good decay. The horns sounded clear, but a little unnatural and honky. It was a very BA timbre to the horns. They're not peaky or fatiguing, and ultimately still listenable, just not particularly natural. The bass elevation, which works so well for hip-hop, works really well on the kick drums on this track, but the tuba sounds bloated and out of balance, just, even more unnatural than the other horns. And I had a similar issue listening to Herbie Man, Spirit in the Dark. The flute on that track, solid, a little bit less, textured than it would have been on something like the P1, but again, not peaky. That in particular is really impressive for a KZ earphone. KZ's always struggled with treble refinement and peakiness, and for something like Herbie Man ripping on the flute, upper register jazz stuff to sound smooth, I can forgive them a little bit on texture because it's listenable. With stock tips, that's a lot for KZ. That's a big step in the last couple of years that they've taken. But on this track, the bass guitar suffers the same issue that the tuba did on Suspicious Bulge. It's just unnaturally bloated and off balance. The attack and decay are a little smeared. So what I think is going on here is that the tuba and the bass guitar are smearing across the dynamic driver and at least one set of the DWFK dual BA mid drivers. I don't know that this is necessarily an issue with the crossover or the physical design of the earphone, because it nails it for the genres that I think this headphone is targeted at. But, this is something I encountered a lot with more instrumental music. Lee Ritenour, Riverman. Again, treble and mids were overall excellent, but the bass guitar, same thing, just bloated, slow, out of balance. Not quite as pronounced on the other two tracks. Definitely not unlistenable. Again, I think these are for really casual listening, and if I'm on the bus, I'm not going to be sitting there picking apart whether the attack and decay of the bass guitar are a little smeared. I'm going to be trying not to edge into the space of people around me and just get where I'm going. which is why I don't think this is a particularly good critical listening set. But, I think this is forgivable at the price point and forgivable for the signature and how fun and engaging these are. But a noteworthy flaw if you primarily listen to that kind of music. That's really all I have to say about sound. Getting to gear pairing, straight up, these just don't need a lot of power. On the KN here, I run between 35 and 45 out of 100 steps on low gain. They sound great on the ES100. I don't need to get anywhere near the top of the volume slider on that, and that's just out of the single-ended output. They're plugged into the X-Can right now just because I wanted to see if they would scale. But they really don't. I noticed a bit of an improvement in clarity and dynamics moving from the ES100 to the KN. But moving from the KN to the X-Can stack, I really didn't notice anything improving. So I think that these are detailed enough to to scale with a better DAC, but I don't think there's a whole lot of dynamic performance to extract with raw amping power beyond the 150 milliwatt per channel level, because going from this to this, we're talking a 3 or 4 fold increase in power, and they sound the same, given the same DAC. And I suspect that if I ran this as the source for this, it wouldn't sound a whole lot different than just the ES100 on its own. There's no way of really knowing where the heck you are in the volume chain on the X-Can because it's color-coded instead of giving you any sort of numerical value, but I'm in the first or second color out of 5 or 6 on the X-Can, so I'm really not pushing the X-Can at all. Verdict on these: if you listen to not even primarily, but just a lot of modern hip-hop, pop, dance, rock music, or vapor stuff, these are an excellent choice for a sub-$100 IEM. For the audiophile who listens primarily to jazz, classical, and vocal music, this is not your daily driver. They might have a place in your collection for casual use, which is how they're going to be serving me. But as I said, not reference. If reference is what you want, don't buy these. As I've said over and over again, casual listening is where these are going to be most at home. Occasional critical listening sessions, but they're very colored, not reference, and they just need to be used for what they're for, which is having fun, listening to music out and about, or doing whatever you're doing. If you want to pick apart the detail and the mixing of a track, grab the P1s, grab the Canas Pros, grab some HE400Is. But if you just want to rock out, which I was doing all over Publix in these are the headphones. That leads me to a slightly related point. In my last 2 videos, I mentioned I would be giving these away. At least for now, I'm going to delay that. And that is because, one, I expected to be less impressed with these. I figured I'd put them on, I'd say, oh, KZ's made some meaningful, if incremental, improvements in the last 2 years, hand them off to somebody else. But, I'm ready to declare these the new benchmark for the $45 to $100 price point, and I'm going to hold on to these for future reviews, because anything in that price range that comes across this desk is going to have to answer to these in some way. That being said, I haven't heard the T2 or T2 Pro. Kind of want to ask the audience here if I should invest in those. They've been very well reviewed and covered. So I don't think I'd be adding anything to the community in terms of reviewing those, but maybe a T2 Pro versus ZSX video would be good, considering that these won't fit everybody. TRN V90, something that needs to be on the list, but that's pretty much the deal. I'm going to hold on to these for a few months and compare them to everything, because these are an excellent value at their price point if the signature suits your use case. With that, I'd like to invite you to join me next week for a full review of the iFi X-Can. And that's it for me, the Armchair Audiophile, reminding you that life is too short for bad headphones.